Well, good day to everyone joining us, and welcome to today's X Talks webinar. Today's talk is entitled Decentralized and Hybrid Clinical Trials, Addressing the Complexity. My name is Ryan Muse, and I'll be your X Talks host for today. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes, and this presentation includes a Q&A session with our speakers. Now, the webinar is designed to be interactive, and webinars work best when you're involved. So please feel free to submit your questions and comments for our speakers throughout the presentation using the questions chat box, and we'll try to attend to your questions during the Q&A session. This chat box is located in the control panel, which is on the right-hand side of your screen. And if you require any assistance along the way, you can contact me at any time by sending a message using this same chat panel. At this time, know that all participants are in listen-only mode, and please note that the event will be recorded and made available for streaming on xtalks.com. At this point, I'd like to thank Oracle, who developed the content for this presentation. As a leader in life sciences cloud technology, Oracle Health Sciences Clinical One and Safety One are trusted globally by professionals in both large and emerging companies engaged in clinical research and pharmacovigilance. With over 20 years' experience, Oracle Health Sciences is committed to supporting clinical development, delivering innovation to accelerate advancements, and empowering the life sciences industry to improve patient outcomes. Now I would like to introduce our speakers for today's event. Neil Smith is the Director of Clinical Operations for Obvio Health, based in Melbourne, Australia, and is responsible for the oversight of Obvio's regional APAC studies. Neil is a clinical research professional with 25 years of experience in the pharmaceutical industry, having worked in pharmaceutical and CRO companies in Australia, the United Kingdom, and South Africa. Neil has worked in a broad range of roles and responsibilities, having worked in leadership teams and as a line manager, product manager, or project manager, independent consultant, and CRA. And we have Jay joining us, who is a recognized digital health strategist on addressing the challenges facing the global healthcare and life sciences industry. In addition to his responsibilities at Oracle, Jay is also the president of global healthcare think tank HIMSS, the Healthcare Information and Management Systems Society, the India chapter. Jay is the recipient of CXO Health Excellence Award 2021 and recognized as the top 50 strategists in healthcare. But without further ado, let's just go ahead and hand things over to our first speaker today. Jay, you may begin when you're ready.
Thanks, Ian. Welcome and thanks for joining the webinar. So at Oracle, we believe digital and decentralized trials are the new frontier of clinical research and provide the most promise of bringing life-saving therapies and patients faster and cheaper as well. But to truly unlock the potential of decentralized trial study methods, we need to be able to solve the problems that emerge from the current technologies and the processes when implementing digitization. So I've been in the technology and the business innovation in clinical research for more than 20 years. And I've seen a lot of evolution when it really comes to how we engage with people, collect and process data, especially in clinical trials, and how we collect and process data on clinical trials. Now, let's look at the evolution of how the clinical platforms. So when I really think back in the early days of my career, as we started transitioning from paper-based data collection to electronic data capture, clinical development technology strategy focused on choosing the best of the breed solutions to really meet specific functional needs. For example, like CTMS, randomization, IRT. So unfortunately, many eClinical platforms that attempt all-in-one approach that lack key capabilities. For example, like the ability to leverage real-world data, genomics, for example, right, and the patient engagement applications. How do we really seamlessly blend all these together? So these gaps really mean that they still require complex integrations, as well as study setup, configuration, security, and data access within each siloed application. So this has resulted in a fragmented user experience, data redundancy, data quality issues, in addition to delays in gaining access to consolidated data for key stakeholders. which can result in many problems, including missing critical trial issues that put patients at risk as well. So we really look at what is our vision for our next generation clinical platform, which is actually Clinical One. We knew when we started working on our vision for the Clinical One platform that we needed to address these key issues that I talked about, right? So we wanted to accelerate the clinical trial data collection while also minimizing the manual steps and errors. We wanted to make it simple for the sites to use and improve patient access. We wanted to make the data more accurate while ensuring integrity and security, and also shorten the time to data log and also for submission. We also wanted to make sure that it was flexible enough to adapt changes easily while removing the duplication of effort it traditionally takes to set up each system separately. And we wanted to avoid the painful upgrades with the data migrations. And finally, we wanted to ensure the decision makers had access to all data quickly to support clinical decision making, patient safety, and study oversight. So we recently conducted a research survey through our partner Informa on the impact of the newly adopted clinical trial methods used during the pandemic to gain deeper insight into the changing landscape. There were 251 participants globally who responded from multiple organizations of types and sizes, including both sponsors and CROs. So of the newly adopted approaches, the highest response were remote monitoring, video visits, phone visits, and e-consent. These really stood like top approaches for the DCT during the pandemic. Now let's also look at the impact. So what is the impact of these newly adopted approaches in clinical trial? So the vast majority of the respondents who implemented new approaches reported that they had a positive impact on clinical trials, overall about 82%, including 20 to 26% reporting a significantly positive impact as well. So let's go a little detail. The most commonly reported positive impacts of the newly adopted approaches are more timely data, improved flexibility for the patients, and the increased speed. So these are the three things that really came as a positive impacts for the newly adopted trials. So at this point, I'll just take a pause. I'll request Rian to launch a quick poll so that you get your insights from the participants as well, and then we really go on explaining about what we really have from RBO Health and how we can really demonstrate some of the key capabilities that we really talked about from a DCT standpoint.
Yes, excellent. I'm so sorry, Jay. We have the poll question for audience members up right now. You can participate by selecting, in this case, as many of the answers that you see in front of you that are applicable and then clicking submit. The question that we're asking is, what are the components of decentralized clinical trials that you are aware of? Your answer options to select from are ePro, eCOA, devices and sensors, mobile apps, telemedicine, or others. Again, you can select as many of the options that are applicable to you to the question of what are the components of decentralized clinical trials that you are aware of. It looks like most of you have got your answers in, so thank you very much. Let's take a look at our results from this poll. It looks like you 100% of you selected mobile apps, 86% for telemedicine, 71% for devices and sensors, and then coming in, 43% of you have selected for ePro, eCOA, and others. So thank you very much for your participation. We have another poll that we would love to get your interaction with. This one is appearing on your screens right now. As with the previous one, select as many of the options that apply to you and then click submit to participate. This time the question is, what therapeutic area have you experienced decentralized components in a clinical trial? Your answer options are dermatology/cardiology, psychiatry or neurology, rheumatology or infectious diseases, others, or none. You're all very much faster at it this time around. Thank you so much for participating. The question again is, what therapeutic area have you experienced decentralized components in a clinical trial? Let's look at our results for this question. We have 62% of you selecting for others, 31% of you selecting both for rheumatology, infectious diseases, and psychiatry, neurology, and then 15% coming in at the end for dermatology, cardiology, and then none. Very interesting results here. We've got one more poll for everyone. This should be appearing on your screen in just a moment. Here we are. In this case, you are selecting only one answer as it applies to you and then clicking submit. The question that we're asking is, what phase of compound development has your organization implemented in decentralized components in clinical trials? Your answer options are phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, combined phase, i.e. Phase 1 and 2, or phase 2 and 3, or have not had the experience. The question again is, what phase of compound development has your organization implemented decentralized components in clinical trials? Give everyone a few more seconds to consider their answer for this one. Looks like most of you have gotten an answer in. Thank you very much for that. Let's look at your results for this one. We have 54% of you having selected that you've not had the experience, 15% of you only for phase 3 or a combined phase answer, and then 8% for both phase 1 and then phase 2. Again, thank you so much for your participation. I will now hand things over to our next speaker for today. Neil, you may begin when you're ready.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ryan. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for providing me the opportunity to talk to you this afternoon about my experiences with decentralized clinical trials, and for us to have a little bit of a conversation about addressing the complexities of decentralized and hybrid clinical trials. So many of you will be familiar with Oracle as a huge organization. Less of you will probably be familiar with us, Obvio Health, as a virtual research organization. And that's quite new terminology, I guess, a virtual research organization. Effectively, what we do is we have three arms to our business. The first is we act as a full service CRO, so we're involved in conducting clinical trials from phase 1 right through to phase 3, and also involved in consumer health and real world evidence studies. The second component of our business is more a technology company, so software company that integrates technology to improve clinical trials. And the third aspect is the virtual site, and that might be something that not all of you are familiar with. But basically what this is that we hire our own internal medical monitors and study coordinators to conduct clinical trials for us. So one of the technologies that we offer as a company is that purpose-built platform or app. It's a patient-centric app that patients can download on their smartphone, and it enables them to consent patients, so perform e-consent, allows the patients to enter patient-reported outcomes data. It enables us to provide remote training to site PIs and raters and to the patient in the study, and it thoroughly engages the patient with the study through reminders and appointments about their commitments and other parts of the study they need to complete. The key advantage to this is in a decentralized clinical trial is access. So both access to patients for us, so being able to have a much wider scope and patient population to recruit from, but also access for those patients who live remotely in very remote areas who can't get into clinics well. It enables them to be able to participate in clinical trials as well. So this really helps with recruitment and also helps with retaining patients in studies. So we've kind of pioneered this data collection that improves data quality. It allows a simple platform that augments the study teams on site, so it reduces their day-to-day burden in terms of their administrative burden, and it also improves their face-to-face oversight and day-to-day oversight of the study. So a typical example here is it can improve awareness of serious adverse events for remote patients. So in a usual study, you would have a format of those patients coming into a site, either on day 1 or day 15 or day 30, and your study coordinator PI would probably only become aware of those serious adverse events the next time the patient comes into the clinic. With a technology solution like this, it enables the patient to enter their SAE immediately on the device, and for the medical monitor and principal investigator to be made aware of that event as it occurs. So it improves safety, improves quality, and the real timeness of that data that we're collecting. What this does is the platform is effectively, it saves time and money by shortening recruitment and allowing the site to spend more time on their activities of caring for the patient rather than the administrative tasks of following up with those patients on an ongoing basis. And then I talked a little bit about the virtual sites. I want to talk a little bit more about that. And without shocking any of our site members on board, I often refer to virtual sites in decentralized clinical trials as this is what online shopping is to retail shopping. A decentralized clinical trial is to a standard clinical trial. It's a real move away from a physical brick and mortar site to something that is completely virtual. And that means sometimes employing our own PIs and study coordinators to conduct those trials, consent them remotely, provide wearable devices so that patients can be instructed to collect their own information, and vitals and pulse oximetry and pulse, etc. And we can also instruct them to attend local labs, to have local labs collected, etc. as well. So a complete virtual setting. Now, I don't want everybody to be shocked by that because in our operations in Asia Pac since 2017, the majority of our trials today still continue to be hybrid studies. So that is a mix of your traditional brick and mortar on-site study with implementing technology that works for that particular study. So what it enables us to do is pick and choose the components that really work well for us from the beginning of the study. So when we're designing the study, we can read the protocol and look at ways of improving and providing technology advantages for your study. This hybrid approach expands the industry's capabilities for data capture, and it increases, by doing that, it also increases the complexity of the trials. From being able to use a simple EDC to having to use a more complicated platform like Clinical One that is provided by Oracle to be able to integrate all of this data appropriately. Technology has also improved enrollment for studies and the ability to recruit patients. And this is the part that I'm really quite excited about and quite passionate about because it allows us to use an integrated social media campaign to really reach out to bring patients on board to a study. And there's some really new and exciting technology there that allows things such as geospatial tagging, which means that you can send advertisements out to patients within a specific geographic area. So that might be within 30 or 50 kilometers of a brick and mortar site that you've set up. It also enables you to use things like Google and Google Analytics to really change and adapt your advertising campaign and your outreach strategies to precisely target and recruit patients. So that really has brought several advantages with technology to improving recruitment on studies. Another element that you may want to introduce to your decentralized trial is e-consent. And through that that can be a basic virtual consent form that is a hard copy PDF on their device that the patient has the ability to read and answer questions to their study coordinator or PI with, and then sign, to a more complex e-consent, where we offer full support in terms of a video that is completed by the key opinion leader to outline the benefits and risks of that study, to provide the opportunity for the patients to answer questions or ask questions and have their questions answered. We can deliver things like quizzes that verify the patient's knowledge and understanding of that consent form before they're allowed to move forward within the study. And obviously within a technology environment like this, it ensures quality by ensuring that the consent form is the right version. You can deliver that consent form in multiple languages. It is completed in time, so there's no opportunity for assessments to be done on that patient until the consent is signed. So it really delivers some key advantages. And then I guess the other technologies that we've talked a little bit about are things like providing IP and delivering IP to sites during this time. I don't think this is something that's unfamiliar with most of our audience. You know, as we've gone through COVID over the last year and a half, many of our studies have had to adapt to be able to send drug directly to site from using different pharmacy providers. So I don't think that's new to anyone. And then very key is data collection through patient-reported outcomes. So enabling patients to complete things like quality of life questionnaires in different therapeutic areas, allowing patients to have assessments conducted via telehealth visits in a clinical outcomes assessment format. So those new generation ePros, which is key to the patient mobile app that we provide, really do a number of things. They reduce recall bias because you're doing the capture as it occurs. So from my experience with many studies where paper diaries have been completed in the past, you know, you get a mix of patients. Some of those patients who are completing a week's worth of diary while they're sitting in there waiting in the clinic waiting for their visit doesn't give us reliable data. So this form of technology really improves on the quality of that. So it increases compliance. The technology can send reminders to make sure that they complete it on time. And we can optimize the questionnaires. So we can gamify the way that they're presented on the phone so that patients are more engaged and more compliant in completing their questionnaires. And you know, these type of questionnaires we've had the opportunity to deliver in a number of formats. So we've conducted a number of studies in Australia and across the region where we've used these type of questionnaires. So I can give you an example. We're currently working on a treatment-resistant depression study where we deliver workplace productivity indexes. The Hamilton Depression Rating Scale is completed by the investigator via telehealth, and we also look at collecting treatment satisfaction data. Another example here is, for example, we're collecting data on treatment of advanced breast cancer patients, and we're looking at a targeted regimen here, and we're looking at how those patients adapt and how their lifestyle is changed whilst they're taking that targeted regimen. So we have the opportunity to collect general quality of life questionnaires, symptom assessments. We also looked at very specific indication for breast cancer questionnaires, so like a FACT-B, which enables us to collect data on those patients. So the remote monitoring, I've talked a little bit about this previously. We don't want to reinvent the wheel here, though. We've used several wearables in our studies, so things like pulse oximeters and blood pressure monitors, temperature monitors, respiratory monitors. We've implemented those studies in a number of studies, And we use devices that have been registered within those countries and providers who have done the validation of those particular wearables. Where we differentiate ourselves is we have our own tools that we are developing and validating, and working with several universities globally to ensure that those are validated before we use them. So a key example here would be we use imaging software to look at skin lesions, to look at stool consistency. This is something we've used on an infant study that we're currently conducting that looks at the Bristol stool scale and shows and differentiates the difference between the data that's being collected by the caregiver of that pediatric patient and the doctor in-house. And what we're able to do is, through the use of video and photographic technology, we're able to improve that scale to ensure that we're collecting reliable data from the patients. Another example would be audio technology that we've used in a pediatric colic study. So this is something that collects information on the frequency of the patient's cough, how long the infant's been crying for, voice activity detection. So that's how long it takes the parent of that patient to come in and respond to their child who's been crying in the nursery. Very good technology, very cutting edge technology at looking at how we improve clinical trials. And then video can be used for things like movement disorders and activity, to monitor sleep duration and cough frequency, all of those type of things. So really cutting edge image and audio technology that we're helping to develop. So what I might now do is just give you a couple of examples of studies that we have that are ongoing. One of those is a case study, a COVID-19 case study that we've run recently. Quite a small study, a phase 2 safety and dosage confirmation study that we ran during the COVID period. And as you can imagine during that period, it's quite difficult to recruit patients to a clinic because during that sickness, they don't want to come into the clinic, and because of government restrictions, etc., it makes travel into sites more difficult. So what we did here was we aligned the reporting of the symptoms through the ePro. We shipped out medical devices and IP to the patients. And those medical devices, we had 3 remote monitoring devices that collected, temperatures, pulse oximetry, and ECG data, which was centrally read. And then we collected PCRs through using mobile nurses, or the patient had the option to go into a set clinic for that information, and all of that data was integrated by collection through the app. Quite groundbreaking and quite successful. And similarly, we have a study running in the region at the moment. So across Asia Pac, we're running a study for the collection of post-operative pain data from patients in 5 countries across Asia Pac, so in the Philippines, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, and Hong Kong. And within that, we are collecting pain scales through an ePro device, so patient-reported outcomes, and also a scale that is administered via telehealth. Again, this is quite early days of the study, but very exciting data that we've begun to collect. And the final example I wanted to give you is an app-based therapeutic medication, a device that we're using for pain. And in this study, data is being collected within the app for the sponsor, and it looks at the frequency of migraines, and it looks at app usage. And it's also an ePro device that is an ePro that is collected through Obvio Health's app to look at how this device works in helping patients with migraine. It's a Basically, the program is it's a CT132 digitally validated program for patients who are having 4 or more migraines a month, and it's a class 2 device as a preventative to the migraines, and so we collect this ePro data on the migraine incidences and the quality of life of those patients throughout, and this is one of the first studies that we have we are conducting in partnership with Oracle to make sure all of this complicated data that we achieve from the devices and from the ePros can be collected and processed using Oracle's platform, EDC platform. So with that, I might just hand back to Jay.
Thank you, Neil. I think that's a great presentation. I think it's you kind of talked about real-world application of decentralized styles. So I think there are two major challenges, right? One is how do we really, lessen the burden for the site staff? I think that's one of the things, especially when it comes to the decentralized styles. Secondly, the increased volume of data. So these are two real key challenges that really stand out. So that's the reason why when we really designed the next generation platform, the Clinical One platform, we really kind of looked at these specific aspects. So I think the earlier part of my presentation, we talked about how currently most vendors are creating siloed applications, whether it's a data collection, RTSM, or a CTMS. What really happens is you are kind of duplicating a lot of activities at each of these individual areas. For example, like you have to create sites, you have to create subjects at every single siloed business process workflow. But what we are doing in Clinical One is we're actually creating a unified platform where we're kind of moving away from a product-centric model to a capability-driven model. So the sponsors would be able to pick and choose what capability I need for a study. For example, for a particular trial, I need a study startup, say I need a EDC and RTSM. So you'll be able to configure those capabilities very quickly. So that is where we're really moving forward. Secondly, we're also kind of building this a platform wherein we can bring in a lot of capabilities. For example, the Abio Health, where we can actually consume the decentralized style capabilities from Abio within the Clinical One platform. That's the kind of model that we're really adopting with the next generation Clinical One platform, wherein each one, currently they're adding, for example, like trial bill. The trial bill, they do it separately for data collection, separately for RTSM, but with the Clinical One platform, you can do a single trial bill. You can use it across the entire clinical development lifecycle. That's what the innovation that we really are talking about from an overall solution perspective. Now, I'm just going to give a quick preview of what a Clinical One solution would look like. For example, you can really see a single user interface, irrespective of what functionalities, the different roles, for example, whether it's CRA, or data manager, or a study startup specialist, or clinical trial operations. So all of them can log into a single user interface for all of their trial-related activities. Now, I'm just showing you right now is where a CRA, for example, right? You can really kind of manage all the activities, whether it's a screening, whether it's a randomization, whether it's dispensation, all of them in a single console. So, for example, if I'm an end user, I can see all the studies that I have access to in a single console, and each of these studies can be executed either a test study or, for example, like say production study or a training. You can pretty much you can really do that. So, right, traditionally what happens is most vendors, you have like multiple environments, for example, development environment, testing environment, production. But here, everything is one single URL. You can simply promote a study from one stage to another. So that's something that we have really done that with this platform. So you can really see this example where you can see the complete visit schedule of the patients. The site users will know clearly, what's the next visit. They can also click each of these visits and see what data has been collected. If suppose if they want to know what data collected in the previous visit, so all of that is available. It's a very simple, user-friendly tool where they can kind of manage, all the activities in a single console. This example is where you can really do the screening. You can do the screening. You can also do the randomization of subjects. All of that in a single screen. So you can really see the workflow is very similar, irrespective of what functionality you really want to access within the system. And it also gives much more streamlined user experience rather than having managed different accounts, multiple systems to do these various activities. For example, like the CRAs can log into the system. Similarly, for example, if the CRA wants to do the management of deviations, the protocol deviations or monitoring reports, so this completely like streamlines the number of systems they have access to, the need to learn about multiple systems, and the overall workflows perspective. So all of this is clearly managed within the system. So I think so far we looked at some of the things from a CRA and the site perspective, but you can also see there is a very strong capabilities around the data managers, how they can look at the data, how they can do the data cleansing, how they can raise the discrepancies in a single platform. So for data managers, other stakeholders, for example, like medical reviewers, the interface is very simple, very similar. So they can log into the system. They can really see the data, for example, in analytics, across all the data sources and studies they have access to. It allows the real-time access to data in a very, very simple way. I think earlier I talked about deviations and how do we really capture that. That is also something that you can really see that in the screen that I'm just showing you as an example. So this is again the data manager workflow. We have the ability to see the data across all the data sources. It also provides the real-time access to data. So one of the things that we've done is we actually use Oracle Analytics Cloud. That's a next generation analytics platform, which is actually integrated seamlessly with Clinical One, which we call as Clinical One Analytics. So that really gives the flexibility to really how do you harmonize data that is coming from external data sources, for example, even from a central lab. All of these, how do we really aggregate into a single source of truth? And we actually use Oracle, the Clinical One Analytics, to really provide a holistic view, which is what either data managers view or a CRA's view. So each of them would be able to really have dedicated dashboards to really look at the functionalities. So it's really like it's cutting edge in terms of how do we really access, and it also gives the real-time visibility of various activities that's really going on. It also helps to identify the risks that's involved and how do we take necessary steps to address those key risks that's been identified in a particular trial. So just comes to the last part of the presentation. I think the benefits of this approach is that you can rapidly set up the studies. You don't need to implement multiple siloed products. You can choose what capabilities I need. Very quickly, you can set up. Secondly, you can also adopt these features as they released. There is absolutely no downtime per se. As and when the new capabilities comes up, you should be able to really use that. It's also quite scalable. For example, you start with single trial and you want to add on to a large number of trials in a similar same platform. It's pretty seamless from that standpoint. And one of the complexity in most of the trials are mid-study changes. For example, if there is a big change in a CRF or anything, it really takes a lot of time and effort. But with Clinical One platform is you don't need to make the study down. I mean, pretty much like you can make the changes and apply all the changes into the study. So you can very quickly you can do the mid-study changes without really impacting the study timeline. So that's one of the unique feature that we really have. And then centralized data. I mean, whatever the data sources coming in, whether it's EMR, whether it's ePro, all of this data really comes into one single source of truth. This is where we really bring in the master data management capabilities, for example, like data warehousing, to really look at the data from various heterogeneous data sources, and then how do we really use it for analytics and for quicker decision making. We also have one unique feature that we have built into this platform is actually what we call as digital gateway. So the digital gateway has the ability to bring in third-party data into the platform without really writing code. So we do have standard industry-based adapters. So you can really make use of those adapters to say, for example, talking to a third-party EDC system or ePro system or a telehealth concern. You can pretty much like bring in all the data through the digital gateway. So the platform is really highly scalable, and all the data that is centralized and give you instant access to what specific information you probably would need to really make use of it. So with really, I think that's the summary of my presentation. So with the capabilities ObioHealth brings in, and with the next generation clinical one platform that Oracle has, with really the combined capabilities would address pretty much all the complexities of what typically you would really foresee if you have to run a decentralized trials in a way. So with that, summary, I will pass the control back to Ray.
Well, thank you very much for that insightful presentation. I would like to invite the audience to continue sending their questions or comments right now for this Q&A portion of the webinar. I've already received some questions, so we'll get ourselves started with those. The very first question that I have for you, gentlemen, would like to know, what are the challenges in incorporating this type of DCT technology into trials?
Neil, do you want to take up, or should I answer that?
Yeah, please go, Jay, and I can pick up after you if you like.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges, the different types of data, right? Every capabilities from a DCT standpoint, whether it's eConcern or whether it's ePro, how do we really bring in this data, harmonize it, and then use it seamlessly within the overall clinical workflow? I think that's been a major challenge for most part in terms of really having very seamless end-to-end workflow. I think that's a part that we really think is one of the challenges. Secondly, nowadays, I mean, we really see wearables, digital biomarkers being used to a large extent, right? So how do we really bring that capabilities into a trial? And because how do you really process those large volume of data, and then how do you make use of it from a clinical trial standpoint? Those are some of the things that really comes top of my mind. Probably Neil can add his points as well. So.
Yeah, so I'll add a couple of things there. I'm looking more from the operational kind of perspective. So I think it's really important. We've made leaps and bounds forward in decentralized clinical trials with COVID over the last 18 months. Lots of the countries' regulatory and ethics have really come to the party to make sure that we can implement COVID trials and get them processed and get them working quickly. I think one of the challenges is going to be not taking a backward step in terms of, we allowed this for COVID, but now we don't do the same going forward with other trials. And we do see that we've recently run, for example, some studies in Thailand, where we've previously run a COVID study that allowed e-consent, and the ethics committees were very happy with the e-consent process. Now we've moved into a different therapeutic area, and some of the more traditional thinking older ethics committees have come back to us and said, no, we don't want to use e-consent. So you've got those ongoing changes and adaptation to technology that we really have to we have to try and get rid of those perceptions. Another similar example would be, especially in Asia Pac, where we treat our investigators with a lot of respect, and that's kind of the relationship of the patient with the investigator. The investigators sometimes say, my patients can't do that. They don't have the technological knowledge to use an app in that way, and we prefer using a paper-based platform, for example. And some of the data that we've collected, we've done questionnaires on studies that we've run that have been purely ePro app-based, and the information that we're getting from those surveys is that we see very little difference in compliance across age groups. So we did a small study recently, where we looked at compliance in a 18 to 35, 35 to 49, and then 49 to 65, 65 over. And there were only a couple of percentage points difference in terms of the compliance of those patients in the older age groups with younger patients. But there's still a perception that this technology is very new, and patients are not going to be able to cope with it. When the reality is that the first app stores opened back in 2007, 2008, so we've had 15 years of these of apps with patients and that kind of knowledge.
Excellent. Very great detailed answer. Thank you both for that. The next question I have for you states that the healthcare system in Australia is state-based. So can the one virtual site in a central location in Australia provide services to participants in every state?
So that's a very good question. That depends on how you set up your study. So the experience that we've had to date has been in a very hybrid trial-based scenario. So studies that we've set up to date involve sites in each of the states that we're working with. So we haven't run a study in a strictly decentralized format where we only have that investigator in one state. So and I'm happy to go back to that person if you've got them, Ryan. I'm happy to provide some more information to them about what we've done to date.
Very good, excellent. Will do. Our next question would like to know how you see the Southeast Asia market. How do you see this market for this product, specifically India?
Yeah. I think we're already running trials in most part of the world, including India. So I think there are early adopters who are really looking to leapfrog in terms of what they really currently have. And they certainly want to move away from the challenges what they really have in terms of setup time. Everybody wants to have very quickly to kind of scale up and run the trials and go for like database log to really gain the significant advantages. I think so. We do run trials in India, Singapore, Thailand. So we're really seeing now people kind of moving completely away from paper to a next generation clinical trials platform, wherein they can really have flexibility to choose what capabilities they need based upon the trial. So I think, we do have a lot of successful case studies, and we'll be happy to kind of share what we really have. Neil, do you want to talk about some of your Obvio trials?
Yeah, and I can only second that, Jay. So we're currently running a number of studies in Southeast Asia. Currently running studies in the Philippines, for example, Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Kong, Thailand, even Bangladesh. So it's very wide. There are a couple of big markets there that we individually still need to move into. So we've got plans to move into those markets, but some of the bigger markets like China and South Korea, our experience is quite limited at the moment. But we have a partner that we work with that works in those areas as well. The uptake is surprisingly very strong. The current study that we do, which is a post-operative pain study, and it's quite a unique study because we've got inpatients and outpatients. So some of the patients post-operatively need to stay in the clinic, and we have a more paper-based technology that we operate with those patients, where the investigator will complete data on an app. And then we've also got outpatients who can leave the clinic quite quickly after their operations, and then they're reporting their usage on an app remotely. And that is taking place in 5 countries across the region, where we deliver consent forms in about 7 different languages, and we use ePro devices, etc. So the uptake's been very positive there.
Yeah, and just to add on to Neil, I think one of the things that customers looking, especially from a unified platform perspective, is they want everything like pre-integrated. Nobody wants to spend time, really kind of putting all the pieces together. For example, I have an ADC. I want to send the adverse events automatically to my safety system. They expect the platform to have all those capabilities, right? I think that's where the decision making in terms of the right platform comes into play. But these things are already a reality. I think we do run a lot of trials in South Asia and across Asia Pacific with the new next generation capabilities.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. The next question I have is someone wondering if you can just expand a little bit on what they might need to do to realize the full potential of patient-facing technology into their trials.
So I think one of the key elements is how do we really involve the subjects early on in the trial, right? Even during the protocol design, how do you really get their inputs into the overall design of the protocol, and then really see, what study makes sense to really make it a virtual. I think the hybrid, I think Neil talked about, there is a significant adoption of hybrid trial. The key is to really see which study, which visit really makes sense to come to the site versus where do you really see the virtual components, and really blend that together so that it really gives a very seamless experience for the subjects who are really participating. So they need to really understand the value and how these technologies makes the life simpler for those who are actually participating in a trial. I think that's where the real success really lies in terms of bringing these virtual components into a clinical trial. Yeah. Neil can add his thoughts as well.
Yeah, and I can't agree more, Jay. I think, and that early phase is really exceptionally important. So, we operate as a full service CRO. So we've got in-house medical writers, we've got in-house medics that have experience running these trials and can share the knowledge that they've developed using DCT. So we really want to get those clients in early so that we can be involved in the design of the protocol, and we can show areas where we can really optimize that design using technology and using platforms to really improve the way that we collect that data. And it can be done with all sorts of different types of trial. We're recently doing early phase oncology studies where in a traditional setting, you would have day 1, day 2, day 3, day 5, day 15 data for a patient who's being reviewed by the principal investigator. And when we've spoken to the design team and we've spoken to those principal investigators, we can realize savings where on perhaps day 3 and day 4, those assessments, through ECG or collecting bloods or whatever it may be, can be done remotely so that you don't have the cost of bringing that patient into the clinic as frequently, but you're not losing those safety measures, so you can still safely monitor those patients and have contact with them.
Wonderful. Thank you both for that. The next question I have has someone wondering, from your experience, have you seen a high adherence with treatment compliance with protocol in DCTs?
Yeah, so absolutely. So that's a great question, because it's almost a sales point for us in terms of the things that we can achieve with a DCT, right? So by using the example I use is quite unusual, right? So I have 2 adult daughters who I never communicate with face to face, or you never pick up a mobile phone and actually talk to them. All of the messaging is done through Messenger. That's if you look at the Western world nowadays, most of us spend 15+% of our time stuck to our mobile devices. And what that means is that we get engagement from the patients, just intrinsic engagement, because they're using a device that allows them to interact with the study. So engagement and retention is very high. So retention across trials is typically 88+%. As is recruitment. Recruitment's a lot is a lot quicker. So we've done a small sample of studies since 2017. We've run 42 odd studies across the globe, and the average recruitment against a traditional study is about 4 times quicker. So we can recruit patients in 3 months, where it would take a traditional study 12 months to recruit. And their ePro data, the data we collect electronically, there's higher than 88% compliance in data collection.
Yeah, just to add on, I think it really gives a lot of flexibility for the subjects. They don't have to really travel, and then wait for the appointment. All those things, right? It's really gives flexibility. There are reminders automatically goes to the patient when they need to take, for example, say vital collection. So it really makes their life very, very simpler, and it makes them to really, encourage people to participate. Otherwise, people can't really travel and really do that with a lot of challenges. Yeah, so certainly it increases the protocol adherence. Whenever, because the reminders, the missed visits are very, very less. You can pretty much like track the subjects on a regular basis.
And the app's designed, so our app is designed to send out reminders to those patients as well, right? So you get a little ping on your phone that tells you, you need to attend a lab visit tomorrow or the next day. It'll remind patients. So they'll get a reminder on their phone. When we use, we also have an in-house team of study coordinators that are often involved in our studies. So they're called our coach team. And they're responsible for taking that administrative burden from the sites as well. So they'll physically phone the patient or email the patient or message the patient to remind them and to support them with the app as well.
This is very good. Thank you very much for that. I have another question here, asking if you could, both of you, just sort of expand on what types of DCT technologies that you have had experience with implementing.
Vinil, you want to start? I can.
Yeah, sure. So typical experience would be eConsent. That's a technology that's used through the app to consent patients remotely, and data can be collected. Another example is ePro data, so that's patient-reported outcomes data in the form of quality of life questionnaires for multiple therapeutic areas, from oncology to COVID, to other infectious diseases, pain management type questionnaires. Clinical outcome assessments, so that's where the principal investigator or rater completes an assessment with the patient through telehealth. So we have telehealth visits, so that's a decentralized clinical trial tool that we use. Another is the wearable devices, right? So wearable devices in terms of devices that sync through Bluetooth with the app to collect all sorts of things, from temperature to pulse to crying to collecting pictures of actual infant stools, all of that type of technology. So there's quite a wide range there.
Yeah. So in my view, I think ePro certainly stands out. Most of the studies now looking at incorporating element of electronic patient-reported outcomes. So I think nowadays, most of the solutions comes with multilingual capability. So even the questionnaires can be in local language, where people can freely enter the data. That's been one of the key requirements. There's also a lot of survey elements. Even if studies that doesn't need a full-blown ePro and scales like Equa, but even they have like a very basic survey element where they actually want to capture the data from the subjects participating in a trial. So telehealth also now gaining traction, especially during the COVID-19. Most regulators, including many countries in Asia Pacific, have allowed the virtual components to really be part of the trial. And now it's continuing, the momentum is continuing now. I think more and more you see regulators accepting decentralized trials is the way to go.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that answer, for all of the answers today. However, we have reached the end of the Q&A portion for the webinar. Now, if we couldn't attend to your questions, though, the team at Oracle will follow up with you. And I want to thank you, though, for participating in today's webinar. You will all be receiving a follow-up email from XTalks with access to the recorded archive for this event. A survey window will be popping up on your screen as you exit, and your participation is appreciated as it will help us to improve our webinars. Now, I've also sent you a link in the chat box, and with this link, you'll be able to view the recording of this event on this page, and you can share this link with your colleagues when they register for the recording here as well. So I encourage you to do that. Now, please join me once more in thanking our speakers for their wonderful time here today. We hope that you all found the webinar informative. Have a great day, everyone, and thanks for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your participation today. Thank you.